The black SUV screeched to a halt outside the glass tower, and before the driver could even reach for the door handle, Marcus Hale was already out, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders into the morning air. "Tell Davies if those numbers aren't corrected by noon, he's done. I don't care about his excuses." He cut the call without waiting for a response, straightened his tie, and walked into the lobby of Hale Industries without once looking up from his phone. The receptionist greeted him with a bright smile. He didn't see it. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, he had fired 3 people, restructured an entire department, and shaved $2 million off the company's quarterly budget. His board applauded. His assistant looked like she hadn't slept. Marcus considered it a productive week. He was the kind of man who believed the world ran on 2 things, leverage and efficiency. Sentiment was a liability. Compassion was a strategy used by people who couldn't compete. He had built Hale Industries from a failing logistics startup into a billion-dollar empire, and he had done it without once stopping to ask if the people around him were okay. That wasn't arrogance, he told himself. That was discipline. So when his assistant Nina slid a printed article across his desk that Thursday afternoon with the words, "Thought this might interest you," he almost ignored it. Almost. The headline read, "Mama Rosa's, the restaurant where nobody leaves hungry or unloved." Marcus leaned back in his chair and read the piece with the same detached curiosity he gave quarterly reports. The article described a small, family-run restaurant tucked into the older part of the city, a neighborhood of cracked pavements and hand-painted signs. The owner, a woman named Rosa Delgado, had apparently been running the place for 19 years. She gave free meals to anyone who couldn't pay. She remembered every regular customer's name, their children's names, their struggles. Former employees called her the best boss they'd ever had. A local councilman was quoted saying she had done more for that neighborhood than any government program. Marcus set the article down and tapped his fingers against the desk. "This is a marketing story," he said aloud to no one. "There's a PR team behind this. There's always a PR team behind this." Nina appeared in the doorway. "She doesn't have a PR team, she barely has a website." Marcus looked up slowly. "Then she's losing money on sentimentality and someone is writing nice things about her on the way down." He paused. "Or she's figured out some kind of angle. Either way, people don't succeed in business by being nice. That's not how it works." Nina opened her mouth, thought better of it, and left. Marcus read the article again. He read it a third time, not because it moved him, he told himself, but because something about it didn't add up. 19 years, not a franchise, not a chain, not backed by investors or a celebrity name. Just one woman, one kitchen, and apparently an unshakable refusal to treat people as anything less than human. He picked up his phone, then set it back down. Then he had an idea. The next morning, his driver was confused when Marcus instructed him to drop him off 4 blocks from the destination rather than at the front door. He was more confused when Marcus stepped out of the car wearing a gray hoodie, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers. He was completely speechless when Marcus smeared a faint streak of grime across his jaw from a small container he'd brought in a paper bag. "Sorry. Pick me up in 2 hours, same corner." Marcus adjusted the old cap on his head, shoved his hands into the hoodie pocket, and walked away without another word. The neighborhood closed in around him gradually. Narrow streets, children playing near a broken fountain, a barbershop with a hand-lettered sign, a woman hanging laundry from a second-floor window humming to herself. Marcus felt strangely exposed without his suit, without his phone pressed to his ear, without the invisible armor of wealth that usually moved people out of his way. He almost turned back twice. He found Mama Rosa's on a corner between a hardware store and a small chapel. The outside was simple white walls, a hand-painted mural of sunflowers, a chalkboard sign by the door that read, "Today's special, jollof rice and hope. Walk-ins welcome, all hearts accepted." Marcus stared at the sign for a long moment, then he pushed the door open. The heat hit him first, warm, fragrant, alive with the smell of spices and something sweet baking somewhere in the back. The restaurant was full, not the frantic, transactional fullness of city eateries, but something different. People were talking, actually talking. A group of elderly men near the window were laughing loudly over a shared joke. A young mother was nursing a baby while her toddler drew pictures on the back of a paper menu. 2 construction workers sat across from a man in a business suit, and none of them seemed to find it strange. A young server, maybe 20, with a bright head wrap and easy smile, appeared beside Marcus almost immediately. "Welcome, just one today." "Yeah," Marcus deepened his voice slightly, shifted his posture, tried to look tired. "It wasn't very difficult, just one." She led him to a small table near the side wall and handed him a laminated menu. He noticed the menu had no prices. Before he could ask about it, a woman emerged from the kitchen. She was perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair pinned back under a white cloth, a generous build, and the kind of face that seemed permanently arranged toward kindness. She moved through the room the way water moves through familiar grooves, naturally, unhurriedly, touching a shoulder here, refilling a glass there, laughing at something a child said as she passed. She was not performing. That was what stopped Marcus cold. There was nothing performative about her. She was simply present in a way most people never allowed themselves to be. She reached his table and looked at him the way a person looks at someone they've been expecting. First time. Yes, Marcus said. Good, she smiled like that was the best news she'd heard all day. I'm Rosa, what's your name? He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Michael. Michael, she said it like she was committing it to memory. Are you hungry, Michael? I am, but he paused, let his eyes drop, manufactured discomfort. I don't have a lot on me today, things have been tight. She didn't flinch, she didn't glance toward the kitchen or look anywhere other than directly at him. Then you came to the right place, eat first, we'll sort out the rest after. She was gone before he could respond, already back in motion across the room. Marcus sat back slowly, he'd expected hesitation, a flicker of calculation, some version of the weighing that people always did when money was uncertain. He'd seen it his whole life, the invisible arithmetic of worth that played out on people's faces. It hadn't crossed Rosa's face for a single moment. The food arrived quickly. Jollof rice, tender and perfectly seasoned, with a small bowl of stewed chicken on the side, a piece of fried plantain, and a glass of cold zobo hibiscus drink, deep red and lightly sweetened. The server placed it down with the same warmth Rosa had shown, asking if he needed anything else, genuinely waiting for the answer. Marcus ate slowly. The food was extraordinary, not just in taste, though the taste was remarkable, but in the fact that it felt like it had been made by someone who cared whether he enjoyed it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a meal that felt like that. He was halfway through when he decided to push. He waved the server over. Excuse me, my daughter, she's sick at home, couldn't come with me today. Any chance I could get a small portion to take back for her? I know it's a lot to ask. The server's face softened immediately. Of course, what does she like? Anything she can't eat. She loves plantain, he said, and she's been having a hard time, so. The server was already writing it down. I'll pack it myself, give me a few minutes. Rosa appeared at the table again, this time pulling up a chair across from him without ceremony. Your daughter, she said, what's her name? Marcus blinked, he hadn't expected to be asked. Amara, he said, picking a name from the air. Pretty name, Rosa folded her hands on the table. Is she very ill? There was something in the directness of her attention that made Marcus feel for a disorienting moment that he was the one being tested. She's managing, he said carefully. Some days are harder than others. Rosa nodded slowly. It's the hardest thing, watching your child struggle and feeling like you can't do enough. She paused. How are you doing, Michael? He opened his mouth, closed it. He reset, I'm fine. Rosa looked at him steadily. You don't have to be fine here, she said simply. A lot of people walk through that door carrying things they haven't put down in years. The food helps, but sometimes just being asked helps more. He didn't answer, he couldn't. Something had shifted in his chest in a way he hadn't been prepared for, and Marcus Hale was a man who prepared for everything. He recovered quickly, he was good at that. You must get a lot of people like me, he said, steering back to safer ground, people who can't pay. People who need something, she corrected gently, that's different. You can't run a restaurant that way, financially it doesn't work, she smiled. We've been here 19 years, Michael. But how? She tilted her head, considering him. When you give genuinely, not for reward, not for recognition, something always comes back, not always from who you expect or when you expect it, but it comes. She stood, smoothing her apron. Besides, a hungry person who leaves here full tells someone, and that someone tells someone. Community is the oldest business model there is. The packed portion for Amara arrived in a neat container with a small handwritten note tucked under the lid. Marcus turned it over. It read, Tell her Rosa says she's stronger than she thinks. Get well soon, sweetheart. Something in his jaw tightened. He sat with the meal, with the hum of the restaurant, with the sound of Rosa moving through her world like a warm current. He watched her refuse no one. He watched her sit with an old man who seemed to have nowhere else to be, listening to a long story about someone the old man clearly missed. He watched her redirect a tense moment between two young men at another table with a joke and a plate of extra plantain until they were both laughing. He watched her staff not with the alert anxiety of employees under a demanding boss, but with the ease of people who felt safe. And slowly, without intending to, Marcus began to remember. He remembered being 23 and asking his first mentor for a chance, and being told there was no room for people without the edge. He remembered deciding that day to build the edge. He remembered the first time he'd cut someone loose from his company and gone home and eaten dinner alone and told himself it was necessary, it was logical, it was the cost of success. He remembered every dinner since that had felt more or less the same. He sat in Mama Rosa's for nearly 90 minutes. When the server came back to check on him, he asked for the bill. She smiled and said, "Whatever you're comfortable with." He reached into the pocket of the hoodie and his fingers found the single folded bill he'd brought as a prop, a 50. He put it on the table, then reached into his waistband where, out of habit he hadn't even been conscious of, he'd tucked his real wallet. He left everything in it. He was standing, pulling his cap back on, when Rosa appeared at the door. "Michael," she held out a small packet. "Chin chin for Amara, children like sweet things when they're healing." He took it, he looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached up and took off the cap. Rosa went very still. He pulled the small prosthetic edge off his jaw, wiped the grime from his face with the back of his sleeve and straightened up to his full height. He watched her face for the anger, for the betrayal, for the calculation that would follow the recognition because she would recognize him. He'd been in the papers enough. Rosa looked at him. Then she said quietly, "I know who you are, Marcus Hale." The air went out of the room. "You knew," he said. "Since you walked in." Her voice was calm, unhurried, the same as it had been all afternoon. "The shoes," she added simply. "Men who have known real hardship don't wear shoes like that with old clothes." Marcus stared at her. "Then why?" "Because kindness isn't a performance I give to people who deserve it," she said. "It's just what I do. You could have been a king or a criminal and I would have fed you the same plate." She paused. "The question was never about you, Marcus. The question was whether you were willing to sit still long enough to feel something." He had no response. He, who had an answer for every board member, every negotiator, every crisis, had nothing. "The note for Amara," he said finally, his voice lower than it had been all afternoon. "You wrote it knowing she wasn't real." "A note like that doesn't do any harm," Rosa said, "and you never know who needs to hear it." He held the chin-chin packet for a moment. Then he said, "What would it take to help you expand this, build a foundation around what you're doing here?" Rosa studied him. "It would take you understanding that this isn't a project, Marcus, it's a life." She looked at him the way she had from the very beginning, not at his net worth, not at his reputation, not at the disguise he'd worn or the real face underneath it, just at him. "Start small," she said. "Learn how to say someone's name and mean it, the rest follows." He nodded once. Then he walked out into the late afternoon sun, carrying a packet of chin-chin and the peculiar, uncomfortable, clarifying weight of having been seen. In the weeks that followed, the people around Marcus Hale noticed something they couldn't immediately name. He started asking questions that weren't about numbers. He learned his receptionist's daughter had just started secondary school and asked about it on a Monday. He delayed a cost-cutting decision for 30 days to explore other options. He approved a staff welfare proposal that had been sitting on his desk for 8 months. He didn't announce any of it, he didn't post about it, he just did it. And somewhere in the older part of the city, Mama Rosa's stayed open on a corner between a hardware store and a chapel, feeding whoever walked through the door, asking their names and remembering the answers. Because sometimes the greatest lessons come from the simplest hearts. If this story moved you, subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. Drop a comment below, tell us, when was the last time someone's simple kindness changed something in you? And if you know someone who needs this today, share it. The right story at the right moment costs nothing and changes everything.